Welcome back to another episode of Man in and Out of Flow podcast. If you are a new listener, welcome. If you are returning, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here with me. I love to say that you could be anywhere else, but you chose to spend a little time with me, and I am eternally grateful. I'm going to jump right in because this is a conversation that is very important to me, and I'm sure that it's important to a lot of people. I think that many times, and this doesn't just apply to this topic, but many times we believe that our problems are so unique and specific to our circumstances and the time that we're in right now and the things that we're dealing with. And we so rarely recognize how universal things are, how much we all can relate on the human experience. The only thing more challenging right now than probably the economy and the job market, honestly, is dating. And I hear it from so many people in so many places from so many different walks of life: men, women, straight, gay, non-binary persons, trans people. Everybody is struggling to find that one person that's right for them. And if they've even found someone, maybe they found someone and they're not absolutely sure, or maybe they're dating around trying to land that right one. And a big problem is that love is not about finding someone new. Sometimes it's about choosing differently. I said it probably very recently in another podcast that for a really long time, my therapist told me that love is a choice. And for whatever reason, I could not connect with that. I just thought that love was this feeling that you developed over time. And when you knew, you knew. And once you felt so energetically drawn to another person, that's what love was. But honestly, and it's not to say that love can't be those things. It's not to say that those things are not a part of the process. But honestly, a lot of times what it really comes down to is connecting with somebody, and then beyond that connection, choosing to show up with your love in the way that you love as you are a part of that person's life. I'll explain that a little further. But before I dive too deeply into that, I'm going to take you on a little bit of my journey. For a really, really long time, and when I say a really long time, I'm 41 now. Let's exclude anything pre-adulthood. So I'm 41. I've been dating since I was 18. A big part of my problem as a youth, and when I say youth, I mean early 20s, mid 20s, late 20s, maybe even early 30s. A big part of my issue was that I was a serial monogamous. And when I say that, I say it to mean it was never intentional. I don't believe. I wasn't necessarily looking to have backup plans. I wasn't talking to one person while I was dating someone else. I never had anybody in the wings, but it was almost as if as soon as one relationship ended, I would be okay because there was somebody else. Maybe, I don't know if they were waiting. I don't know if it was necessarily that maybe, prior to that relationship, there were hopefuls that didn't work out and they were still around. But I've always said there's rarely ever been a time as to where I was not involved with somebody. Even if I wasn't in a serious relationship, I was in a situationship. I was dating someone. There was somebody that I was texting or sexting or in some type of romantic dynamic with. And that was my situation for a really long time. And a big part of dating for me when I was younger, and I don't know how many other people can relate to this, was all it took was for somebody to tell me that I was cute and be nice to me. And I was all in. And that, of course, came from low self-esteem, childhood trauma, not feeling worthy, not feeling deserving, not really having a great sense of what self-love was and how to show it to myself. So it was one of those things as to where anytime somebody made me feel special or important, anytime someone made me feel valued, I ran to that. Give me more of that. I desire to have that. And so it'd be, you're cute too. Now we're hanging out. Now we're being intimate. Now we're in this makeshift relationship. Now we're arguing like crazy. Now we're breaking up and getting back together until finally we are off that ride. And then eventually I'm doing it with somebody else. So I always tell people, as much as I would love to be that person that can give advice when it comes to relationships, I don't believe that I'm not an authority on someone who can tell you how to get it right just yet. However, I can tell you many, many ways to get it wrong. A lot of my young adulthood was spent in relationships with people who, like I said, a lot of very rushed energy. I'm jumping on it. We're throwing caution to the wind. I'm not seeing anybody else seriously. You're not seeing anybody else seriously. Why not attempt to make something work? And really, what it came down to is sometimes months, sometimes even weeks, maybe even, yeah, let's say months or weeks. Days is a little rough, but eventually you realize that you're in a relationship with somebody that you don't necessarily know because you haven't taken the time to get to know them. You haven't laid the foundation. There's been no real groundwork. And then maybe you even learn to recognize, hey, I don't really like this person very much. They're not somebody who, if I would have really decided for myself or been more intentional about my choice, that I would have necessarily been interested in. Not to say that they're not attractive, not to say that they're not a great person, but for whatever reason, they don't do it for me. So yeah, like I said, that was a big part of the young adulthood for me. As I got a little older, and let's say this has been within the past 5 years, I got to a point shortly after my mom died that I decided that I wanted to do therapy. Therapy was something that I think I had advocated for so long. I always believed that, as young people, if a lot more of us had access to that resource, maybe we could have certain things just figured out in a better way. Some things just a little bit more things would be a little bit more manageable. We'd learn to navigate our journeys a little differently sooner in life. So I was rearing and ready to go. But it's funny because I had already at that time gone through stage 3 colon cancer. Like I mentioned, I had lost my mom. I had been through some really, really traumatic experiences throughout my lifetime, but the reason that I wanted to start therapy was because I wanted to understand for myself why I could not be okay being on my own, why I felt it necessary to be in a relationship in order to feel comfortable, in order to feel like I had a sense of normalcy, in order to believe that I was happy. Note that I said believe. And so entering into therapy, starting on that journey within this 5 years, I've learned a lot about myself and I've made some important decisions as it applies to how I want to show up in life. And so with that, I spent a tremendous amount of time single. Not to say that that entire time I wasn't necessarily still trying to date. There were times, and there have been times recently where I've said, I'm not sexual or romantic. Everything that I can invest into another person, into a relationship, I want to invest it into myself right now. But there have been times where I've been on Tinder and Hinged and Bumble, swiping right and left, meeting people, hanging out, going on dates, getting to know people. But it all starts to kind of feel like a revolving door. You go from talking to somebody and engaging on such a deep level, and sometimes even speaking to a person, or on some level communicating with a person every day, to, before you know it, never talking to them again. And now you're starting over and doing that same thing with somebody else. So I had to get to a point as to where I got off that ride. A lot of that came from developing a greater sense of self-love, learning to understand who I was as a person, learning to recognize that the things that I want for myself, the things I want to do, the places that I want to go, the experiences that I want to have, all of those things are valuable. They mean something. I should put them here over anybody else's happiness. We'll talk about how I spent years trying to make other people happy instead of myself at another time, another conversation for another day. But I had to recognize that it was so important to put myself first, not just in dating, but in everything in my life. So I'll say honestly, that's how I even got to this conversation. Then moving forward, I think a big part of something that I'm developing and understanding of lately is that it's important to choose somebody based on who you are and your values. It's important, and we hear this word so much, to be intentional. And again, I'm speaking about my experience. I'm not a dating coach. I'm not here to give anybody any advice on dating. At release of this conversation, I am a single man. But I will say that what I'm learning is that in recognizing who I am as a person and recognizing how I show up in the world and recognizing the things that are important to me, the things that keep me feeling balanced, the things that bring me peace, the things that bring me joy, the things that inspire me. In every part of my life, I want to continue to grow those things, to continue to nurture them and to curate experiences that will allow more and more of those things. So anybody that I do decide to be in a relationship with should be a person that essentially adds to that value, should be somebody who, and it's so funny because for a long time, I was one of those people that felt like people had to check boxes. I'm not even going to say a person necessarily has to check specific boxes, but you want to make sure, okay, these are the things that are important to me. This person doesn't necessarily have to view them the same exact way that I do. However, if they view them the complete opposite of how I view them, how can we coexist? How can we find common ground? Is there eventually going to be what's the word? I'm stumbling over it. Are we eventually not going to be able to reconcile conflict based on it? Because whatever that word is, I think it's irreconcilable. It's fucking me up right now, but we're going to move on. But it's important to note that also, if these are the ways that I enjoy showing up in the world, if I sometimes want to just exist, sometimes after a long week, sometimes after a long day, sometimes after a long month of work, whatever it is, I just want to take some downtime and to just be. I don't want to have to be on go. I don't want to have a lot of conversation. I don't want to have to go places and do things and have experiences. If you're with a partner who thrives in those spaces, who likes to be on the go, that is the life of the party, that likes to have a lot of attention, and they enjoy to have their partner with them for those experiences, it may not necessarily be a compatible situation. So a lot of what I'm talking about right now is making sure that you're choosing a partner that is not just good on paper, making sure that it's not just somebody that looks good and that, you like the way that they make you feel, but you also recognize how they can show up in your life and whether or not that's actually conducive with the life that you live. Also, another thing to note, and this can be a little bit odd for people, but it's learning that healthy love can feel unfamiliar. If you've only ever experienced toxic relationships, if you've only ever experienced representation of love in ways that it just doesn't work, people don't get along, there's always some form of jealousy or ego or pride or damage within the context of the relationship, when you get to see something different, when you actually experience healthy love, when you have somebody that supports you and embraces you and supports you and holds space for you and is comforting and is effective at communication, or whatever those things are that show up as healthy love for you, sometimes it can be a little off-putting. Sometimes it can be a little scary. Sometimes you can not recognize it as something that's good for you, but based on what you're so used to, you might see it as a negative. It's important to lean in when you start experiencing that. And I'm speaking to myself directly again. I'm not trying to give anybody else advice. This is more for me than for anybody else. I'm just kind of having this is a journal entry, a diary entry, if you will, right now with you all. But yeah, it's really important to recognize that. I think for a long time, I was so used to people who didn't necessarily make me feel safe, but stroked my ego in a way that made me feel important. And because of the importance that I felt that it was okay for everything else that wasn't right to exist in the way that it did. As long as you were stroking my ego, as long as you were making me feel like a big man, as long as I felt good about who I was based on the things that you said to me, yeah, the rest of the life can be chaos. That's fine. We can roll with that. And if I'm being honest, at this big age, at this point in my life, I'm not making any more space for chaos. I don't want it. I need peace. I have to have it. It's mandatory for me. A big part of another part of the dating conversation for me lately is that so many people say that dating sucks in the places that they live. I have friends in New York, I have friends in Philadelphia, I have friends in different places in New Jersey. I have friends in Florida, California, Texas. I'm here in Tennessee. So many people think that where they live is the worst place in the world to date. And I'm here to tell you, anybody that's listening, trust me and believe, because I've lived in many different places. Dating sucks everywhere. It's so interesting because it's almost like playing the lottery. It's almost like looking for a red ball in a sea of black balls and trying to pick out that red ball. Like millions and millions of black balls in that one red ball, and you want to make sure that you can pick it as you're diving through this sea. And it's unfortunate because sometimes people present well in the beginning. Everything looks great on paper. They say the right things. They inspire the right feelings. They make you feel good. You love being around them and having conversation with them. But when it comes down to it, eventually you start to pick up on things. You start to see different personality traits and facets of their character that may not necessarily work well with who you are and what your life is. And it's important to be able to note those things early. Um, I don't really get that deep into the red flag conversation, but let's talk about it just for a second. When it comes to red flags, it's important not to ignore those things. Anytime you do feel uneasy about something, anytime somebody does show up in a way that makes you kind of question them or just anything, like make sure to like really lean into that. Do some investigating, trust your intuition. Don't just ignore it. Don't say, hey, everybody has problems. I struggle with running at the first sign of trouble, so I definitely don't advise anybody of that. But like I said, do some investigating. Make sure that what you're noticing isn't something that may be a little bit bigger and that could become a greater issue later. But even with that, I think it's really important to note that if the waters that you're swimming in don't feel safe for you, it's okay to expand beyond your reach. So many people are limiting themselves to the idea of not being in a relationship because they don't want to date long distance. However, who are you dating locally? Where is your successful relationship where you live right now? Who have you been able to make a successful relationship work with in your area? And if the answer is nobody, yeah, while it might be a lot to have to travel, yes, while it might be a lot to have to curate experiences virtually, yes, while your love language may be quality time or physical touch or whatever that looks like, if you're not getting what it is that you want or need where you are, what does it hurt to try something different? Just a thought. I remember there's a guy, and I've talked about him before, but he asked me one time, he said, "You're so handsome. Why are you single?" And I said, "Because I'm tired of being impressed and I'm ready to be wowed." And I never realized it until that moment that that was how I felt. It was such an instinctive reaction, but it was real. It was my truth. I always tell people you can meet three people. Let's say you meet 10 people, throw out a bigger number. You meet 10 people and you talk to all of them, and five of them have great conversation. The other five, not so much. And now you've hung out with all five, and all five of them are funny and cool and smart, but two or three of them are just really, really interesting and have certain qualities that just keep your attention. So two of them have fallen by the wayside. And then from those three, you have these guys that are, or girls, or whoever you're attracted to, that are attractive. You enjoy their conversation. You enjoy spending time with them. What are the values for you that will allow that one person, if there is one, to stand out for the rest and allow you to choose that person? And how do they represent the, like, what do they do without really knowing that that's what you're looking for to show that to you? And that might be an important question to ask before jumping into a dating experience. Like, what exactly is it that I value in a partner? What exactly is it that I'm seeking from a dating experience? What do I hope to gain in the long run when it comes to this person that I'm seeking to share my life with? Because if you are anywhere within my age range, unless you're just still in that space of having fun and there's no judgment, have your fun, do your thing. But many people that I know and have these conversations with are at that place now as to where any dating experience that they're seeking to have is somebody that they're hoping has the potential of being a life partner, somebody that they can share their lives with. And of course, that brings about a lot of fear, but it can also bring about a great deal of excitement. The older I get, I'll be honest, I am less and less impressed by sparks and butterflies. Those things were the most amazing things in the world to me, to watch movies and to listen to love songs and to just sit up in my room and scribble somebody's names and imagine what our future would look like. That was everything. However, at this point, it comes a dime a dozen. I can feel sparks and butterflies with 10 people in a week if it really comes down to it. What's more important to me is consistency. What's more important for me is knowing that somebody cares about how I show up in the world. The things that I say are important to them. They value my time. They respect me. They show interest in what's going on in my life. The things that are important to me, even if they're not important to them, they still are curious about those things and maybe learning a little bit more about them. I think for me, I'm more interested in having a person that complements my life as opposed to a person that just magically fits in and locks in and makes everything feel perfect. Because I've had to learn that the idea of perfect isn't really that realistic. Sometimes, as much as we desire to have this perfect love story, it's never going to happen. And it has to come down to who is the one person that beyond anything that they could do to get on my fucking nerves, everything else that they do outweighs that, and I can tolerate their little silly shit and I can make it work with everything else that's great about them. And I think that once I find that, I'm going to be in a space as to where I can feel like I did not magically become perfect for somebody, but I became willing to exist in a space with them. That's what I'm longing for. Tell me what you're longing for. I'm really interested to know. Anybody else that's dating right now, whether you're having good experiences, whether you're struggling, leave it in the comments for me. I'm always interested in engaging with you all, especially the people that do listen. I do have friends personally that I share the podcast with that share it with me, their thoughts, their views, their opinions on conversations. But if you're a new listener, if you're somebody that does not know me personally, I'm definitely interested in understanding what your view is. I'm always open to new perspectives because it is hard out here right now. And sometimes it's lonely. Sometimes it's really difficult feeling one of two ways. I have a great life. I'm really happy with the way that things are. I'm excited about where life is going. I just really love to have somebody to share it with. Or life isn't necessarily the best that it could be, but I'm grateful for where I am. I'm looking forward to it going in a direction. I'm just really, really lonely right now, and it'd be nice to have somebody here to help me feel supported, whatever it is. And I'm sure that there are other ways to view it, but whatever it is, I think it's really, really important just to remember that whether you're having successes in dating right now or not, whether you have somebody that you're romantically involved with, or maybe you're in between dating experiences, or maybe you haven't talked to anybody for a really long time, just remember who you are. Remember your worth and your value. Remember to love yourself. Remember to embrace the things that are important to you. And know that it's important to trust that what you want is available to you, even if you've been looking for a really long time. Again, that idea of the red ball and the sea of black balls. It's there. You just have to find it. And I'm rooting for you on your journey. And I hope that you're rooting for me on mine because, yeah, we're going to find what's meant for us. It's there. We just have to keep pushing, keep going, and keep making ourselves available to the opportunities. Until next time.